I hate talking about political issues like gender and stuff like that. But I'm going to make an exception because I think I have a really clear example here of how something that on the surface looks like an injustice really isn't when you probe a little bit deeper. So I was watching this documentary earlier today, and it was about technology, and there was a woman that claimed that at Amazon only 14%, I think it was 14%, something like that, 14% of the high-paying tech jobs at Amazon were occupied by women and the rest were men. So it looks like, it looks like one of these injustices, and you know how people talk about the oppressive male patriarchy and all that. But I thought, no, that's not what it is. And I'm going to try and prove that to you. Now, I work in a school for 11 to 14-year-olds. And one of the things I do is I run an extracurricular activity, which is a computer programming club. Now, as you can imagine, that's not something that appeals to a great mass of children. It's a very specific nerd type interest, and I mean that in the best possible way of that nerd. I'm a nerd, right? So every year it's a new batch of kids that are invited from year 10. It's open to everybody, male and female. But the thing is, I get mostly male applicants. We can get into why that might be in a moment, but one year it's maybe all boys. It's maybe a room full of 10 boys. Another year it's maybe 8 boys and 2 girls. And another year maybe it's 1 girl and a whole bunch of boys. I think the most I've maybe had is 4 girls and maybe 7 or 8 boys or something like that. So the point I'm making here is that boys more than girls seem to be interested in STEM related things. STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Yeah, so computer programming, sometimes called software engineering, is a STEM field. So I'm just pointing out that it's open to everybody, but it's boys predominantly that choose it. Now, in the interests of full disclosure, I am going to say that for 2 particular years in mind, my best coder was a girl, right? So that's awesome, right? That's great. But it doesn't change the fact that it's still, year after year, consistently, mostly boys that join the club. And I think that has to do with the fact that the male brain is wired a certain way and the female brain is wired a certain way. And there's a bit of a mix here and there of what we're interested in. But it tends to be the boys that their minds work more with an interest in tinkering with things. You know how it's mostly men that are mechanics, right? There's nothing wrong with a woman mechanic, but it's mostly men. So it's the same with something like computer programming, software engineering, right? It's fine, women are not being prevented from choosing it. It's just that even at this young age of 13, 14, they're just not choosing it in the same degree that boys are. So you take that further on, and it means that more boys than girls are choosing STEM at GCSE level, then at A level, then at university, and then comes time to apply for jobs. So you're getting more boys applying for STEM jobs, more men rather, applying for STEM jobs than women. And nowhere in this picture is an oppressive male patriarchy. It's just brains doing what brains do, It's no different than the fact that you find far more female nurses than male nurses. But there's nothing wrong with male nurses, and they're probably very good at their job, just the way females are too. So we're really just talking about the direction in which a trend lies. There's nothing exclusive about this. And I'm even thinking back to, the teaching profession. In my school, there are way more women teachers than men. That's true also in the other junior high school in my town. And as I think back to my primary school, there were 7 primaries with about 2 classes per primary, so there's 14 teachers needed. There were definitely only 2 male teachers in my primary school out of a total of 14. Why? Because females gravitate to that sort of profession more than males. But here's the thing. You don't get men rising up and claiming that they're being oppressed because there aren't enough male nurses or male teachers. That doesn't happen. But it is happening where we get women claiming that they're being oppressed because there aren't an equal number of people in, say, the STEM field, right? But if you really look at it, to say that there must be an equal number of men and women employed in, let's take the Amazon example, where there's only 14% of women employed in the top technical jobs at Amazon, right? If you say that it must be 50-50 or thereabouts, that's actually not fair, particularly on men. Because if you get predominantly male applicants to the job and hardly any female, some but hardly any by comparison, female applicants, and there must be a 50-50 outcome, well, those few female applicants are almost guaranteed a job. Whereas the male applicants, who make up the bulk of the applicants, have to be confined to 50% of the outcome. So that's actually an injustice, you see? And notice, I'm just taking gender out of the equation. If you get, say, 80% of applicants as men and 20% as female, you're just not going to get 50-50 outcome. And if this is based on a trend to do with human behavior, that's not going to change. You can encourage females to get involved in STEM, but nothing was ever done to discourage them. It's been open. It is open in the case of the little club that I run. Like I said, they're just not picking it as a trend. And the girls I do get have been great, memorable people that I will never forget, along with some of the boys. So all I'm really saying here is, don't see everything through the lens of an oppressive male patriarchy. It is true that in the elitist positions in society, that is occupied mostly by men. But that's completely separate from the bulk of the population. I've never done anything to oppress a woman in my life. And that is true of every male that I know. So you got to stop looking at the feminist propaganda and seeing it like all men are out to get you. No, it's just there's this little elite group that run things that mostly women are not invited to participate in. And guess what? 98% of the men are not invited to participate in it either. I can't walk into that way of life. I'm denied high positions of power in the same way that women are. You see? I mean, when I was growing up, and I think about my mum and dad, working class people. My mum worked in a sewing factory, making clothes. My dad was a labourer in a factory. They worked hard all their lives, both of them. My dad didn't deny anyone the opportunity to do his work. His kind of work wasn't the kind of work a woman would want to do. It was hard graft. And my mum was working at a sewing machine all her life because that just happened to be the sort of profession that she fell into. You know? I think when you see things through the lens of male oppression, it's not so much that men were trying to deny women some kind of privilege that they had. I don't see that my dad had any real privilege, or that I've had any real privilege. I've had to work really hard to get a decent job. So it's not to do with us men having a privilege. It's more that in the past, women were free from a responsibility that men had. And that responsibility was survival, putting bread on the table. It was more traditionally the role of the man of the house to do that. Whereas the woman could choose, if she wished, simply to look after the house, right, and raise the children, while the man went out into the world to make money so that his family could survive. I mean, the next time you think of, you know, the bin man, that's probably the wrong word now, isn't it? Bin person? You know, the waste disposal people, whatever they're called now, you know, coming to collect your bins and empty your trash on a weekly basis. Take a look at them. They're mostly men, right? We're not aiming for 50-50 there, are we? But that's not perceived as a very glamorous job, is it? But those are the people that keep you know, keep the towns and cities going, right? So they deserve our respect. But they're not trying to oppress anyone, are they? No. They've simply taken on a responsibility that all these feminists that talk about male oppression, they don't want to take on that responsibility, you know? It's not as clear cut, this whole feminism thing, as it seems at first glance. And you can dive into all the propaganda and end up with a very skewed view of the male of the species that is nothing like how it actually feels to be a man and the responsibilities that a man has. You know, the primary emotion that I feel towards the female of the species is a protective emotion. And I mean, that's bound to be true of any good, I'm not married, but it's bound to be true of any good husband. But is that something that a feminist now looks down upon in the interests of some sort of perception of equality? I don't know. But it's a very natural feeling for a man to have as someone who is typically, whose physiology is stronger than a female's body. When we do have more muscle mass, that's just a fact. You know, you can't deny that. Yes, there are some wimpy men and there are some really strong women, but again, as a trend, that's just how it goes. The male physique is stronger than the female physique. So circling back around to what I was saying at the beginning, you know, just remember when you see a statistic that says there's only 14% of women in the top tech jobs at Amazon, it may not be because of an oppressive male patriarchy. It may just be because it's the men that apply for these jobs more than the women. Think about it.